Hey everyone, Dukinus here with a video focused on the Gunslinger's grenades, inspired by the June balancing update implemented by Bungie last week. The first thing I did was adapt to the Blade Dancer's changes. You can find that video below. But after finding a competitive Blade Dancer build and adjusting to a new strategy, I've moved my focus to the Gunslinger. This is going to be a 3-part mini-series. The next 2 videos will feature throwing knives and their available perk options, and then another video about the other modifiers in the Gunslinger skill tree. The only focus of this video is the Gunslinger's grenades. I'm going to show proof of how much damage each grenade does, which actually includes a ninja nerf excluded from the patch notes. I'm going to debunk a couple of false rumors going around the community, and then I'm going to offer suggestions for what I believe are the best ways to use each grenade. We'll start with the Tripmine. Take a look at this clip where I appear to have stuck an enemy. You can tell it's a stick because of the spastic light changes on your enemy's body. I thought it was crazy, so I reproduced this with a better clip, and sure enough, the Tripmine hits your enemy, which activates the grenade. It then falls off your enemy and goes off as soon as it hits the ground. So I guess technically they don't stick, but the end result of a Tripmine stick is still unchanged. Next I want to debunk a rumor I've seen on the forums that the Tripmine cannot one-shot any Guardian in the Crucible. This is actually not true. Take a look at this footage. I'm in Classic Free-For-All with Seizure, who's running max armor, and Mangos, who's running minimum armor. As you're seeing, Seizure survives, but Mangos does not. So you can one-hit with a Tripmine, but how low does their armor have to be? After testing this with different armor builds on his Warlock, Seizure and I determined that your armor needs to be about 4 or higher to survive a full Tripmine blast. Therefore, Warlocks and Hunters will or will not be one-hit depending on their preferred armor. A Titan will never be one-hit by a Tripmine as their armor cannot dip below a 5. Bungie either stated or implied that Tripmines were intended to be used as traps. I've seen airplanes guided into a terminal with dimmer lights than the Tripmine shines with, so it's unfortunately not trapping anyone. And further, even though I always run max recovery and agility, a lot of people run max armor, so you can no longer reliably walk away after dropping a Tripmine because it won't kill your opponent, most likely. Leaving a guy absolute across the map isn't giving you a benefit. So now that we've labeled the trap method as outdated, I'll show a couple of ways where I still find them effective. You can use Tripmines as a last resort. We all know when we're inevitably going to lose a gunfight, so once you've accepted defeat, try and launch a Tripmine at a wall next to an enemy. As long as you've hit them with one bullet, you're going to trade. You can also use them defensively. This is a clip from a Trials game. We hit one of our enemies with a grenade, and our opponent knew we were going to push, so he stuck Tripmines to the wall on the ground, which ended our push, because by the time we shot them out, our opponent would have recovered their health. This works if you're being chased and you need to recover, reload, or reset. Lastly, if you know you've damaged an enemy, even if it's just one bullet from the Doctrine, and they're hiding behind a corner, you can stick a Tripmine to a wall facing them, and it's a guaranteed kill. We'll move to the Incendiary Grenade. As someone who preferred these pre-update, when I read the balancing notes, I'm thinking, okay, that's not so bad, like I'm not going to be affected here. Well, it turns out, despite being left out of the balancing notes, Bungie actually hit these with a ninja nerf. Pre-update, a perfectly placed grenade hit for 170 damage, plus 5 ticks of 7 damage, for a total of 205. This was enough to one-hit any Guardian with max armor. I saw a couple of posts saying they nerfed the explosive damage. As you can see in these clips, with both a maximum and minimum armor Guardian, the explosive damage was not changed from 170, but the burn was reduced from 7 to 4. As a result, these grenades cannot, under any circumstance, one-hit kill a full health Guardian, regardless of how low their armor build is. This is the second grenade on the Gunslinger that was stripped of one-hit capability in the same update. Right now I'm having a hard time finding any good use for Incendiary Grenades. Their best asset was knowing that you would be rewarded with a kill if you skillfully placed it next to your opponent. Now that that's gone, I feel like they're kind of lackluster. There are some situational uses because you get a decent bounce off the ground and walls, so you can soften someone up from around a corner and then move in for the kill. Also, their explosive radius is actually pretty wide, which makes them ideal to place on control points. You just have to remember that in all scenarios, you will need to lay at least one bullet of damage down to secure a kill. Lastly, we'll talk about the Swarm Grenade, which received a bit of a boost to the tracking radius and damage. The first thing I tested was the damage of a full tag. As you can see here, it does about 130 damage, give or take, depending on the armor build. After seeing this, I was ecstatic, thinking the Swarm Grenade had become some slight variation of the Skip Grenade. Again, I was unfortunately wrong, and it's a lot better on paper than it is in practice. I'll explain here. Take a look at this clip where I catch an enemy by surprise. I throw my grenade directly at him. You would think after catching an enemy off guard and missing very few shots with a good Hawksaw, I would have been able to win this gunfight clean, but I barely won it at all. So I changed my approach and looked into this further. Here I am again, anticipating an enemy coming up the stairs, so I pre-throw my grenade close enough to activate a full tag. I know it's kind of hard to tell, even in slow motion, but I actually have time to land 3 shots and miss 3 shots before my enemy dies. This happens because the grenade simply doesn't activate fast enough, nor is the tracking aggressive enough to be worth using. By the time it deals the bulk of its potential damage, you've already killed your enemy or they've killed you. In both the Vertigo and Cauldron examples, and probably many more, I would have been better off shooting earlier or throwing a different grenade. So although the damage is great, I personally won't be using swarms due to the activation delay and lack of aggressive tracking. Just to conclude and recap, I'll summarize when and why I will be using the Gunslinger grenades. I think Tripmines are the go-to choice in trials and other 3v3 playlists because of the defensive capabilities when every death is precious. You can lock down a relic or the overtime point, as well as use them to clog up choke points to buy yourself time in the event of an enemy push. I like incendiaries and control and some other 6v6 playlists. This is because the big explosive radius is good for attacking control points or enemy spawns. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in my opinion, the long delay and poor tracking on the swarm grenade offset the benefits of the damage and radius buff. As a result, I don't recommend using those in any playlist. By the way, as a side note, let me know if you have other creative ways to use the Gunslinger grenades in the comments below. Now before I go, I gave you the facts and I gave you suggestions on how to use the grenades. I really try and keep my videos unbiased and factually correct, but I'm also honest with you guys. So although it's just my opinion, I really feel like the viability of the Gunslinger took a substantial hit with this update. I don't have Bungie's numbers or their data, and they obviously had a reason to nerf the grenades. I'm not challenging them on their rationale or anything like that. But as a player that uses the best tools available to remain as competitive as possible, I gotta say, I'm not sure how much Gunslinger I'll be playing in the near future. As I mentioned, I have 2 more videos coming out that will highlight other parts of the Gunslinger that do make it more viable. I'm just unsure at this point if it's enough to save the class. I guess time will tell, but until then, duking us out.